it can seem like you might be tempted to deprioritize the relationship building aspect when it comes to grants because you have these open applications, but you still have to remember that on the other end there's a person reading your application, and also writing these applications is a lot of work. And if you can get some validation from the funder early on that you're on the right track, that it seems like this could be a successful partnership mutually, then you actually can feel more, justified in actually investing your time in a particular application or a particular relationship.
Are you looking for ways to shorten your marketing learning curve and help your organization survive and thrive? Welcome to Relish This, the Purpose Marketing Podcast, a show for purpose-focused leaders who want to use marketing techniques to fuel their organization's growth. If you're a returning listener and you haven't subscribed already, we'd love to have you. Also, please consider leaving a review wherever you listen to podcasts. Now here's your host, author and marketing specialist, Stu Swineford.
Hey everybody, Stu here. Grants are a subject that come up a lot in the nonprofit space, as most of you, I am sure, are aware. And my guest today is Gauri Manglik, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Instrumentl, which is this really cool platform. It's like a CRM for grant writing. And as a nonprofit, it's really important to get good at grant writing, to understand that you are, whether or not you're ready for grant writing in general, because it can be a big endeavor and it's kind of a longer term play for nonprofits. We all kind of look to chase the money and see big dollar signs, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your organization is ready to actually go after grants. We had a really fun conversation about all sorts of things, mindset shifts, ways to leverage other tools, ways to leverage Instrumentl to be amazing at grant writing and to streamline your processes. I think that if you are in that space or considering grant writing, this is going to be a fantastic episode for you. And here we go. Gauri, how are you today?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. I'm really excited to have you on the show today. You are an expert, or at least your platform that you built really helps nonprofits out in the grant making process or grant receiving process, I guess. I'm super excited to share all of your expertise and wisdom with the listeners, because I know that a whole lot of people out there struggle with that process. So tell us all a little bit about your platform and what you guys do.
Sure thing. Yeah. So I run a company called Instrumentl, which helps nonprofits be more successful with grants. We do everything end-to-end grants, from helping you find the right grants, helping you research the funders in detail, helping you manage your pipeline, create a grant calendar, collaborate with your team, etc. But overall, be more successful and hopefully take the pain out of grants. And using our platform, we have over 2,000 customers and we're growing very quickly. And we find that folks that use Instrumentl are able to increase their grant application output almost double, while actually saving time, just because we make the process so much more streamlined. So that's a bit about Instrumentl.
No, that sounds amazing. I know that, like I said, a lot of people really struggle with the whole grant writing process. Does your platform, have you found that it improves people's conversion as well? Or, it just feels to me like whenever things can be streamlined, there's usually a, kind of a holdover ROI effect on that as well.
Yeah. And so we ask our customers to tell us when they win grants. And it's kind of a hard metric to report on in general, but I would say our customers tell us that they have found it 4 times easier to connect with good fit funders using Instrumentl.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And depending on the customer, right, it could be like they're winning like millions of dollars of grants if they're like a university or hospital, or
right.
You could be winning thousands of dollars worth of grants, which could still be a big deal to you if you're on the smaller end.
Yeah, absolutely. I know that a ton of nonprofits have grants as one of the primary ways that they actually fund their services and what they bring to the table. So anything that people can do to help streamline that process is super helpful. Does your platform actually help with the finding of potential grant resources as well?
Yeah, that's one of the biggest kind of pain points that we solve. And I think that's, from a strategy standpoint, if you're working on grants, one of the most important things that you need to do is make sure that you are looking at a comprehensive data set of all of the opportunities and funders out there. Because if you don't have that, then your strategy is really limited because you're not able to truly prioritize and see all your options. And so what Instrumentl does is it's the most comprehensive database of active opportunities as well as funders for nonprofits based in the US. And on top of that, we also match you to the opportunities and funders that are relevant to you, which is like a huge part of the pain is just like actually, if you were to look through all of the funders that, are based in your state or like gave to organizations in your cause area, you'd be going through so many funders. And so we try to actually use technology to make the process much more streamlined and giving you initial set of more relevant matches.
Oh, that's great. So essentially, you help a nonprofit grant writer or leader or whoever's wearing that particular hat in that that organization. You not only help them kind of streamline the process of replying to or answering grant requests or grant opportunities, but also help them narrow down the target people to reach out to. That sounds amazing.
Yeah, I would say that like one of the things that we realized in this space is that like there's a lot of moving pieces with grants. People have a lot of spreadsheets. It's messy. Somebody's done a bunch of work and then they leave. And, you're in the middle of things with the funder and you haven't communicated that to other people at the organization. And so, a big value of the platform and in general, you could theoretically do this with other tools as well, is just like actually giving yourself like a workflow so that you can have a process of like starting with the comprehensive list and then actually narrowing it down and then having a place to store that and then making sure that you're not like re-researching the same thing like a month later.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. It's almost like a CRM for grant writing. It sounds like sounds really amazing. How did you get into the space, and what brought you into not only just becoming an expert in the grant process, but also the nonprofit space in general?
Yeah, so I came about this from a different perspective than my co-founders. My co-founders were the original domain experts, Angela and Catherine. They worked in the nonprofit space. They had also worked at funder one of them worked at a funder giving out grants. Another, they both worked within academia, writing grants within a university context. So they circled this problem from a lot of different perspectives and were really not impressed with the software landscape that existed to help them do their jobs. And I knew Angela personally. Angela is my wife now, but at the time we were getting to know each other, and I joined as like the product and tech person to help bring their vision to life initially. And I was working at Airbnb doing as a product manager, and then prior to that, I had my own company that was in the tech space as well. And what I was really struck by when they were getting started was that there were a lot of like best practices and like customer obsession, a lot of customer focus that I was seeing in the for-profit tech space, and which caused there to be like better solutions that actually solved pain points for their customers. And I just wasn't seeing that level of like product development in the nonprofit sector. And they had identified an area that was like kind of unique, like even more underserved, because there are tons of like CRMs out there that are trying to, and some of them are actually pretty good from a usability standpoint. But in the grant space, we just were finding that, the existing tools that were out there were really like far behind the times. And I was excited to kind of bring my product and tech experience into this world.
Yeah, that sounds great. The nonprofit space does seem like it tends to get a little bit lost in the mix and tends to be underserved. So it's really cool that you were able to see some blue sky there and recognize that there was opportunity and to capitalize on that. So tell us all about the process and how you work with nonprofits and what they might need to tee up before they make a decision to use software like yours.
Sure. Yeah, I would say that the first thing that you need to try to figure out as an organization is if you're really ready to apply for grants. Is that the right strategy for you to take on at this time? And I often, one thing that I commonly say is that grants tend to be a more advanced fundraising strategy, and it may not be the right fit for you if you're really just getting started with your nonprofit. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense because with grants, you're going after institutional funders, and institutional funders will tend to be more risk averse because they're giving out larger sums of money, like thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars. Whereas if you go after an individual, they tend to be giving you lower sums of money, and they tend to be able to take riskier bets with that money. And when you're getting started, you're still proving out your programs, the success of your programs. You have a vision, but you haven't quite had the right outcomes that you can use to really prove that what you're doing, that you're actually on the right track. And that is often what you need to be able to go and win those larger dollar amounts. So, general suggestion is to kind of use kind of individuals and other means of fundraising that are more able to take on a less proven situation. So if you're getting started, that you're kind of less proven, and then you'll kind of work your way up to organizations that are more risk averse. So that's on just high level, kind of making sure that you're thinking about how to layer in grants in relation to your other potential fundraising channels. And then, once you do have some, if it seems like you're kind of getting there, other things to think about in terms of being grant ready is just do you have those outcomes that you can speak to? And then if you are going to be going after grants, do you have the capacity internally to actually take that grant money and make sure that program is successful, so that you can then report back to the funder and make this kind of longer term feedback cycle of grants make sense.
Right, because a lot of times grants seem like they are more restrictive in nature. Is that accurate? So as a nonprofit, you would want to make sure that you were ready for that restriction potential.
Yeah, exactly. And part of that is actually just there's some work that goes into actually managing the grant and making sure that you are reporting back to the funder on your progress and making sure that you're kind of keeping track of those financials. And you want to make sure that you actually have the capacity to do that.
Yeah, I think that so many people get all excited about the revenue or the the money opportunity, but forget about all of the other things that kind of come with it, that they're going to need to be able to manage and keep track of. So that's really great advice. Is there a litmus test or some something that nonprofits can think about when they're trying to assess whether or not they're ready to really embark on a grant program? Are there certain milestones that you would say a nonprofit likely would be hitting in order to be a good candidate for not only a grant program, but engaging with you at Instrumentl?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the biggest milestone is being able to show some sort of demonstrated success with an existing program, and be able to speak to that, and in a way that if a funder were to read your proposal, they're going to feel like it's a no-brainer to fund you. I would say other things that to think about in terms of whether or not you're ready for grants or a milestone is if you have the capabilities internally to almost commit to a year and a half to 2 years of of an investment of actually getting the grant flywheel going. And if your organization doesn't really have that, then it might not be the right time, because in addition to grants being a little bit more advanced, it also is a longer term ROI. You can get lucky for sure and kind of know somebody and kind of win a grant. But if you're actually trying to build a regular pipeline of grants, well, sometimes I see people make this mistake where they're they kind of underestimate the overall strategy and the difficulty of it. And they'll just kind of apply to 5 grants and they won't win them. And then they'll kind of give up on the channel. and like, you know, if they had taken a longer term horizon and understood that it was a longer ROI, but it takes a longer time to see a high ROI, then they would have approached the whole channel differently and be more set up for success. So like, what that might mean is like to make sure that you have the capabilities in house to like actually apply for, like, I would say like around a grant a month is like a good cadence when you're getting started out, where it's like you have 12 shots on goal in a given year, and you're also able to, and if you can do more, that's great, but you're also able to not do too much. So you're actually able to invest the time in making sure those funders are the right fit in terms of building relationships with that funder and making sure that you're writing a high quality grant application. Yeah, that's what I'd say there.
Yeah. So it sounds an awful lot like sales, where when one goes into the sales kind of a program or part of a team, it's really more than just, we're just going to spit some things out here. We are really building relationships and trying to get an understanding of how we're doing, get feedback on the grants that we do submit to, but maybe don't get, that it really does become, you know, maybe not necessarily a full-time job, but a very dedicated portion of somebody's core responsibilities at the nonprofit.
Yeah, agreed. And, you know, I think it can seem like you might be tempted to deprioritize the relationship building aspect when it comes to grants, because you have these, like, you know, open applications, but
Right.
you still have to remember that on the other end there's a person reading your application, and also writing these applications is a lot of work. And if you can get some validation from the funder early on that you're on the right track, that it seems like this could be a successful partnership mutually, then you actually can feel more, you know, justified in actually investing your time in a particular application or a particular relationship.
Yeah, it almost sounds like an RFP process for those people who are familiar with that, where a company issues a request for proposals, and then you go through that process, and there's a lot of, oftentimes there are a lot of hoops that you have to jump through in order to kind of successfully navigate that process. It sounds like the grant writing has a similar vibe to it.
Yeah, for sure. And like, you know, I think in any sort of like application process, RFP process, if the person reviewing your application like can remember, like if you're, you know, if you have some sort of social proof or like social validation, or you've talked to them before when they're reading your
Right.
application, they're just going to be like more engaged. I think it's just human nature.
Yeah, absolutely. It's funny, here at Relish Studio, we've responded to quite a few RFPs over the years, but the ones that I remember us actually winning were ones where I made a point of getting a relationship going before we even replied to the RFP, where we would make sure that we got on either in person meetings and kind of talked through our process, got to hear a lot more about what they were doing. So as opposed to just tossing a number over the fence,
Right.
it became something that I think they felt more comfortable with us, just because they, at that point, even though maybe we didn't know each other before they'd started the RFP process, I can't speak for them necessarily, but I do believe that they maybe felt that they knew us a little bit better than some of the other candidates that were out there.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's where like the kind of ROI of grants is something to consider. Like when you actually do spend the time to like build those relationships, like you're going to see more reward, but it's going to take more time. And so do you as an organization actually have the capacity to do that? And if you do, then great, then maybe it makes sense to move forward on that. Yeah.
How do people go out and find the best fit for grant funding? What's the process that you recommend, or what's the process that you help support over there at Instrumentl?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we, have the best process because we are starting from the most comprehensive data set. And then we also have the most, I would say, like robust matching technology to connect, to like help you actually, to help surface the opportunities that you're going to be most interested in and be that will be most relevant for you. And the way that it works is you'll sign up, for Instrumentl. We have a concept called projects, which is essentially like a program area. Most typically at your nonprofit, you'll fill out a particular program area that you're working on, and then we'll match you to both open opportunities where there's like an active call, almost like an RFP, as well as funders that maybe don't have a website or don't have an open opportunity where you just have the information from their 990 data. So we'll match you to both of them. And the experience is kind of like an inbox where you have all the information in one place, which is also really important. But you also have, equally important, I think, is like a workflow and like a process to actually triage that information so that, like I was saying earlier, like if you save something or you bookmark something, the next time around you're doing a search, like you have that information stored, because on a lot of these other tools and processes that I've seen, like people like at the organization are just like re-looking at the same organization, re-researching it again, like month over month, because they don't like have their previous notes or whatever.
Right. And then you end up building that same deck like 40 times instead of just having that one, resource available that you can then pull from.
Yeah.
It's I'm just kind of laughing in my head about how I wish that I didn't know how that process works sometimes, because we've certainly reinvented that wheel a few times over here at Relish. So, what are some of the things that some of the most successful nonprofits are doing that's different from the standard way that people are responding to grants?
Yeah, I think that there's three things at a very high level, and some of it we touched on, but a couple that we haven't. So the first is like in terms of like top three things to be successful. One is like making sure that you're actually ready to win grants. So that means having strong, sustained programs that are operating that you can point to as successes when you're making these grant applications, and then also having an organizational capacity to like implement programs, report back, and actually consistently apply for grants. I would say the second is making contact, building relationships, the same you would for major donors. And we talked about that as well. I think the one thing that I'll say that, one tip here that people don't try, that I have, that I tend to recommend is to like really go deep in trying to figure out how you can make a connection with the funder. And like, obviously you have your board that can possibly help you and your network. But figure out how to go deeper with them. Like I wouldn't just go to your board and say, hey, do you know anybody at, this organization? I would actually try to pull up like a list of people that work at that foundation, for example, and like present that to your board. And then if not, then I might try to also ask them if they know anybody who might know somebody who works at that board. So like also try to get to their second and third degree connections. And you can also use LinkedIn for that as well. And then the other thing that I almost see, like I never see folks doing, is actually, and this you have to be like sensitive about and be like careful about how you approach this, is actually reaching out to previous grant recipients of that funder, which you can see on tools like Instrumentl. So if you have like an organization that's close to you, or you think could be aligned, or maybe even like know somebody at that organization, starting the conversation off by saying like, hey, like I saw you applied to so-and-so foundation, just wanted to understand like what the process was like, and chat with you for 10-15 minutes about your advice on how to be successful with them. And if you're able to build a good relationship with that grantee, it could make sense at some point to ask if they're willing to like make the connection if there's alignment there. And anytime you're doing that, as you're like kind of making these connections with people, also being open to helping them, will just like tend to open doors in the longer term. So like when you're reaching out to make this connection, get on the call with them, always end the call, or before you end the call, make sure you're asking them like what you could do to help, and potentially seeing if you can open doors. And then I would say the last overall tip that I would have to be successful is to like really be scrutinizing with the funders that you're going after to make sure that you're prioritizing your time effectively. So like in that example where like a nonprofit might be like kind of overly eager and like kind of dash out and apply to 5 grants, and then they're kind of like demoralized. And I think that's the situation that I really try to work against, is actually, it's almost like a morale issue. And that's that's important to make sure is high throughout the process, and especially initially, so that you actually have the the perseverance to continue on with this process, given that will take some time for these feedback cycles to take into effect. And so, a couple things that you'd want to look at there is at a high level, like, are you truly aligned with the funder's giving priority? Like, does it really make sense for you to pursue this funder? And if you feel like you're stretching to like meet what the funder's looking to fund, then it may not make sense to prioritize that, and you might be better served to spend more time on an application or a relationship that you feel like is more aligned. And couple of ways that I recommend folks really understanding that alignment, besides looking at the website, is to also see if you can, if they're a private funder, look at their past grantees and see what I call like their implicit preferences. Like, funders will regularly say things explicitly on their website, and then you will look at who they have funded in the past, and you'll see that it's actually different. And you have to use both of those pieces of information, their implicit and explicit preferences, to make a call on if it makes sense for you to pursue that funder.
So basically looking and seeing if they're talking explicitly about every size nonprofit is on the table, but then you go and look at past funded nonprofits and they're all gigantic, then if you're a small nonprofit, it might be worth reconsidering the time and energy that you want to put into that particular opportunity.
Yeah, or you could make a rule that's like, for that funder, because it's, maybe we meet their explicit preferences that they're stating, but when I look at their grantees, I don't seem like I'm a good fit. Like, then you might tell yourself, well, I'm not going to apply unless I can get some confirmation from the funder that it actually makes sense. And you might write them an email and say, like, hey, like, I'm noticing that you're, tending to focus on larger national orgs. We technically meet your criteria, but want to make sure it makes sense for us to apply.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's also just a part of relationship building, and just asking those questions and being willing to put yourself out there, because I think that's a place where, at least I see in the sales world, where there are missed opportunities to understand that that's a back and forth, transactional kind of relationship, in terms of somebody's asked a question, somebody's given some value, and just the fact that there's a conversation going at this point, that I would think would potentially set you apart. That's also an opportunity if they say, you know what, you're right, we do tend to go with larger organizations than you. Than you are, you have the opportunity to ask them for advice or for introductions to other grant programs that they might be aware of that would be a better fit.
Totally. Yeah, that's a great point. Love that advice.
So you mentioned LinkedIn. Are people using Sales Navigator effectively for the research and then connection making? Is that the tool within LinkedIn that you're seeing people use well?
That's a great question. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if that, how heavily that's being used. I do know that I think that if you are using LinkedIn, I would actually, yeah. Can we cut that? Can I start over on this?
Yeah, sure.
I guess, yeah. In terms of LinkedIn, I would say I think the real question is I don't actually know the answer to that. And I think that overall, I do hear that, like, I do see that, like, LinkedIn is being underutilized, and I that would be a great question, is to actually see how much folks are, like, aware of and using Sales Navigator.
Yeah, I'm not sure if nonprofits are using Sales Navigator effectively or at all. I have used it in the past. So for those who are unfamiliar, Sales Navigator is a feature of LinkedIn. It's a paid feature. I believe that it is in the $80 to $100 a month range. You can kind of turn it on and off. So if you're doing prospecting and you want to go hard on it for a month, you can leverage it, then turn it off, and then turn it back on. So you don't necessarily have to think about spending or investing $1,200 a year in the service. But what it does do is it enables you to not only send messages to people that you're not currently connected with, but it also allows you to do a lot of heavy research into people's connections. So if there's a foundation, for example, that you're wanting to get an understanding of of who you might know, who people in your network might know within that organization. Sales Navigator within LinkedIn allows you to kind of dig out that information and see where there are potential first, second, third type of connections that you could then leverage to get introductions or find out more about the opportunity. So I could see it working pretty well in the nonprofit space as an additional tool. And many organizations, I guess social media platforms like LinkedIn do provide some nonprofit resources. I also know that there are nonprofit resources for sure on LinkedIn, but there also might be opportunities to get a nonprofit rate on Sales Navigator. So it might be worth checking out.
Yeah. And the other thing I'd add there is that like the way that I would recommend nonprofits use it for, for looking at connections is to make sure that you have all of your board members and all of your like employees, basically like anybody like in your network, that they're like actually connected to you on LinkedIn, so that when you're using Sales Navigator and you look up a person at a foundation, you can actually see if you have any like second degree or third degree connections if you don't have a first degree one.
Yeah, that's a really good point. A lot of times it's that who knows who knows somebody that's the game winner for people out there. It's like, oh, well, I don't know this guy, but then you start to look through and there's somebody that you both know, and that can be a really good way to get an introduction.
Totally.
We're sort of diving into mindset shifts a little bit here. You've mentioned just kind of the, playing the long game and understanding that this isn't a quick fix, and really having some self-awareness as to the maturity of one's own, nonprofit and where you are in your organization's life cycle, to, whether or not you're ready for grant funding and that type of effort that it's going to take to play really effectively in that space. What are some other shifts that you see nonprofit leaders or even grant writers within nonprofits needing to make, or what they would benefit from to kind of do their job more effectively and have more either at bats or hits?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, and I know this is like, talked about a bit in the nonprofit space, is like truly having an abundance mindset versus a scarcity mindset. And I think the first thing to clarify here is that having abundance mindset is not all on the nonprofit. Like putting that all on them isn't exactly fair, when a lot of that, the reason to have a lot of nonprofits have a scarcity mindset comes from, the funders and the ecosystem and donors and things like that. I liken it to the kind of lean in book that like that whole movement. And I think, on the one hand, like, great, you tell women to lean in, like they should lean in and like raise their hands, but also like there's a systemic issue at play that also needs to be part of the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
But what I will say in terms of, how a nonprofit could kind of have a mindset shift that might be helpful to them is to really try to like equalize in their mind, even though the system is not necessarily going to support it, equalize in their mind the power dynamic between them and their donors. And like the way that I think about it is that, there are hundreds of billions of dollars that are given out each year to nonprofits. And that's like, people are altruistic, yes, but it's not purely altruism. Like, people have a problem that they're trying to solve when they're giving away their money. They have an outcome that they'd like to see in the world. And you see this regularly, right? Like something happens in the world and donations are kind of pouring into that kind of cause area. And a lot of times it's not even the nonprofit that's like raising their hand. It's that these people or these funders, they want to contribute to some sort of outcome. And like, this is the most effective way to do that if they're not going to actually go like start or work at a nonprofit themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I think really shifting the mindset from feeling like you are kind of, asking, or, sometimes people say begging, like funders or donors, to really having coming from a position, feeling like you're coming from a position of strength where you ideally have laid the groundwork to say, like, I'm solving an important need. Like, I've had, some level of success with my initial programs that I've run. And now I'm going to kind of help almost like help donors, help funders, um, like have the outcome that they'd like to have. I just need to kind of connect with the right ones and like tell them that story. That's the mindset shift that I feel like, from a fundraising standpoint, I found to be the most powerful.
Yeah, it's almost a power dynamic shift where instead of coming into it as the beneficiary, it's that you're helping them achieve the goals that they're trying to achieve through their foundation, and the grants that they're giving. And I think I mean I love that idea of that mindset shift, that it's not that you're the one who's getting all of the benefit here. It's that there's a mutual value exchange going on, and your organization is a big part of that. That's a really cool way of kind of reinventing that relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think like one way in specifically that I think that can even come into play with grants is like when you're like you want to get to a place where you, like I said, you're coming from a position of strength and you've evaluated a funder or an opportunity, and you are like you should get to a place where you're like, okay, this is like should be a no-brainer for this funder to fund me. And then if you're rejected, I think you want to approach that with like genuine curiosity, because you had a hypothesis that like you were a really good fit, that you were solving a problem for this funder,
Mm-hmm.
or able to solve the problem that this funder was, trying to solve themselves. And then if you're rejected, to like, yeah, approach that with curiosity and really try to inform that hypothesis and like continually improve, so that the next time around you're potentially able to bake in those learnings. But not getting ideally like not getting like demotivated or anything like that. If you can really kind of start from that position of like, well, like of like you being like a no-brainer.
Yeah, I like that approach, and it's something that we do here at Relish as well. Where if there's an opportunity that we are participating in and we do not get selected as the the vendor for that opportunity, we always go back and ask if there are things that we could improve upon, who they went with. It just gives us some data, or a data set from which we can start to make assessments and make adjustments to improve the way that we show up in the future. And just coming at it that everything there's inherently no black or white, good, bad in any situation. But everything does have the ability to be a learning opportunity. And yeah, I think, I mean, I like the positive attitude and coming at it, that it's a no brainer, but also, that's cool that you're recommending that people try to figure out where the gaps are in every opportunity in every situation, so that they can improve upon their performance next time.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, and you just want to kind of bake in that learning process when you're getting started with grants, so that you, like I said, don't get like kind of overly demotivated if the first couple ones don't work out, because you're going through that learning process. It makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny. I think people have a tendency to believe that they're going to hit a home run the first time they step up to the plate,
Totally.
and to use a baseball metaphor. And that's just, I mean, certainly there are people who may have achieved that. However, I would say that that's a rarity, that we all just need a bunch of swings and a bunch of at bats to get good at even the grant writing process, and just learning how to do that more effectively. Is that a piece? Is that kind of triage, or not triage, actually, after the fact, kind of post mortem? Is that a piece of what Instrumentl does? Do you allow people to track those wins, losses, and kind of gain data based information from that?
Yeah,
experience?
totally. Yeah, that's a huge part of Instrumentl's value, is actually building the system for you, where it's not just like finding the opportunities, but you actually have like you mentioned, like almost like a CRM specifically for grants, so that if you don't win a grant, you can mark that to Instrumentl, you can write the feedback that you got from that funder ideally. And then you can, create your application for kind of set up your application for the next time around, baking in those learnings.
Right. So let's talk about efficiencies. It feels like this is a place where, almost every organization out there, nonprofit, for-profit, can benefit from some guidance and some clarity. What are some of the things that you would see people being able to change, right off the bat to improve their efficiencies particularly with grant writing?
With the actual writing process, or you mean the
Well,
overall?
with that entire process, right? It sounds like Instrumentl has a lot of this baked into to the program and to the platform itself. But are there other areas where people are wasting time?
Yeah, I would say that I think, there's certainly a lot baked into the platform with kind of connecting you to the right opportunities and kind of giving you that workflow. I think in terms of other efficiencies, like the other inefficiencies where I see a lot of that often comes into play with like the collaboration and reporting piece.
Mm-hmm.
So I see folks spending a lot of time like creating kind of custom spreadsheets or even like kind of funder briefs or opportunity briefs that they're collecting from different data sources like the funder's website and the 990 and whatever, and putting together in one place so they can present to their team. Or just like kind of a pipeline summary of like progress if they need to present that to their board, or like creating a report of like all of the kind of grants that they're researching so they can ask their board members if they have a connection. So that's all like very automated and easy to do within Instrumentl, which saves people a ton of time. Especially if you're a grant writing consultant, which we work, I'd say like 10-15% of our customer base are actually consultants working with many nonprofits, and making sure your clients are up to date on your progress is a huge kind of pain point for them, and we simplify that.
That's really cool to know that you have that ability for someone who works in the space as kind of a contractor based grant support, that Instrumentl could actually be leveraged by that type of individual as well. That's really cool that you opened up the platform in that capacity.
Yeah, actually it happened, totally organically. When I would say consultants are some of our like most like our biggest advocates, because they get even more value out of the platform because they're doing prospect research or tracking for multiple clients at one time. And a couple of months ago, we actually launched a consultant specific plan that makes it easy for you to organize your client profiles in one place, and keep your work organized by client. And then also we actually have a lot of consultants that have nonprofits have their own Instrumentl account. And so they're able to essentially link all of those different Instrumentl accounts into one and like navigate between those kind of like workspaces on Slack, which has made the lives of consultants a lot easier.
Yeah, that just sounds amazing as an organization that has a variety of different clients and a bunch of things kind of going on, excuse me, at once. I can really see the benefit of having that, that single research tool, that single kind of automation platform where it just makes everything more streamlined for all of those clients, as well as helping you keep everybody organized and enables you to do an even better job, bringing in grants for all of your clients. That's great that you have that as an option for people who are out there in that grant support space for a variety of nonprofits.
Totally. Yeah.
What do you see? I mean, you work with a lot of nonprofits. What do you see are some of the bigger challenges that they face? Not only in the grant writing process, but perhaps in other areas of their organization that you would love for people to be able to have an effect on and become the best organization that they can.
Yeah, I would say that the biggest area outside of grants that definitely touches grants a lot, and this like kind of common, it's a common pain point that's mentioned in the nonprofit space is essentially like capacity, right?
Mm-hmm.
Capacity and related to that is talent. Um, and I think this also touches on like this kind of abundance mindset versus scarcity mindset, and also just like the system of that nonprofits live in, where they're always trying to keep down costs because that's like, you know, what the funders care about. Just leads to this cycle where they're, you know, on a meta level, like their biggest blocker to success and impact is just capacity, which is yeah, hard to hear because it's so, like, I would say for most small to medium sized organizations like that, if you talk to any executive director, that will be like the number one thing on their mind.
Is how to how to overcome this capacity challenge and get good talent on board. I would say that extends beyond the nonprofit space at this point,
Yeah.
for sure. I did have I don't know if you know Sherry Quam Taylor. She was on the show a little while ago, a few weeks ago, I believe, and one of the things that she mentioned in the same sort of mindset shift, abundance thinking arena, one of the things that she talked about that I thought was just great was the idea that instead of trying to fundraise for your team, so basically saying, okay, well, we need this kind of team to do the good work that we want to do, and so we need to go fundraise this amount of money for that team. Just kind of shifting the mindset that this is what we're building, and that it just changes the way that people forecast. So basically put the team into the budget and then go get the money, as opposed to going and getting the money and then putting the team in the budget, which I thought was just kind of an interesting way to kind of flip that narrative. And, you know, one of the things that I tell clients all the time, and when I'm coaching them, is that you don't have to come up with the entire salary up front in order to bring somebody in. You just need to come up with maybe a couple of months of that salary in order to feel confident that you're going to be able to sustain that type of hire. You know, it's something that I've struggled with for sure, where I start thinking, oh man, I need to get, you know, $120,000 put together to, you know, hire this person that we would really like to have on the team. And it's like, well, you know, no, you just need 10,000 a month. And so it's really interesting to, you know, when you can wrap your arms around that type of shift.
Yeah. And I also I think it's also something that is important to, you know, for folks that are like starting nonprofits or like earlier on, is to actually think about like this problem from day one, right? Like this is like one of the core challenges is like actually making sure that you have this kind of the right talent, which is challenging because of, you know, of like needing to kind of fundraise, but actually trying to figure out like that's like a big risk to your success as an organization. And I always think that you want to like address your risks like as early as possible. And I think like figuring out how, like, not like lowering the bar in terms of the talent you can get, or not like undervaluing the talent from the beginning, like making sure that you have a clear idea of like the kind of the level of talent and like what you're going to be able to pay them like from the beginning, that you think is going to be necessary to make this organization successful. And then saying like, and then really trying to figure out like, so if that's like if that's what we need, then you know, really figuring out what the right funding strategy is like from the beginning, right? Like, and if that funding strategy for some reason isn't there, then you might need to actually change something about like the core model of your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really it's like putting together a business plan before you start the business, as opposed to after the fact. And I know that there are plenty of entrepreneurs out there who have skipped that step, but forecasting and really coming up with that plan early on is that's going to be a key to making sure that you can stay on it.
Yep. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you being on the show with me today, Gauri. I had a really fun time talking with you and learning a lot more about grants and grant writing and what you can do for nonprofits and people in the in that industry to help them streamline their processes here and become even more successful than they already are. Where can people find out more about Instrumentl?
Yeah, so it's we're easy to find. It's www.instrumentl.com. It's spelled instrument and then the letter L.com. So it's missing that last A. And if you go to the website, you'll see that we have a 14-day free trial. So you can try us out totally risk-free. You don't even have to put a credit card in. And so at the very least, you'll hopefully come away with some opportunities that you can pursue. And best case scenario, you'll find that it's something that makes sense for your long-term use as you're building your infrastructure, your grant infrastructure. And if you do end up wanting to move forward with a subscription, we have a code for this podcast that you can use to get a discount. It's Relish This 50 that you can use on the checkout page and get $50 off your monthly or annual subscription. And if you're not quite ready for using a tool for like Instrumentl, you can check out our blog, instrumentl.com/blog, and we're regularly creating like totally free content about how to get ready for grants. We're putting out webinars regularly with grant experts that join us. And again, it's all totally free.
Oh, that's fantastic. And thank you so much for offering that that generous offer to our listeners. I'll definitely post that in the show notes. I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today. It's been so much fun. I love conversations and having these conversations, but I also want to instill in people this idea that we can all have an opportunity to go take some action, whether that be go plant a tree or go, visit Instrumentl and find out if their program is right for you. After listening to the show today, what would you have our listeners do?
Oh, that's a great question. I mean, there's so many things. I would say that if I were to have you take any action, it would be to, if there's somebody that you have been delaying, like asking for a introduction to somebody, it's actually asking them to make that introduction to that funder or to that partner or whoever that could be.
That is a great piece of advice and a good action item for everybody to follow suit. Just go out and make connections and ask for those introductions. It doesn't hurt at all to do that. Thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it so much. And I look forward to continuing our conversation in the near future.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks, Gauri. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye. And there you have it. Another great episode of Relish This. Thanks again for listening. You can find past episodes of the show at relishthis.org. And remember, if you liked what you heard today, please subscribe and leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. For more information on purpose marketing, grab your free copy of my book, Mission Uncomfortable: How Nonprofits Can Embrace Purpose-Driven Marketing to Survive and Thrive. Get your copy now at missionuncomfortablebook.com. Thanks again for